This was a great experience. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about my experience of reading a manga for the first time. So this was a completely new genre for me, and I had no idea what to expect going in. I decided to give manga a try because my husband used to read a lot of manga when he was younger, and he still talks about how much he loved reading them, and he isn't into reading. So I wanted to see what all of the fuss was about. I wanted to know, what is this book genre that got my husband reading? So I went to Barnes & Noble, and this was really the only place that I knew of that had a larger manga section. So there would be a lot for me to choose from. But gosh, there were so many to choose from, and I knew nothing about them. My husband did show me like the ones that were his favorites from when he used to read them, and other ones that like he thought sounded interesting. But ultimately, I ended up landing on I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. I thought the premise sounded interesting. It says teen on the back, so I figured it would be like a sweet little like YA love story, and romance is my jam, so I wanted to see how the romance genre was in manga. And plus the cover is just really beautiful. I was very drawn to it. And then also, so when I was checking out, there was this older lady that was helping me, and she like looked at the cover and she was like, Pancreas, yeah, this is a popular one. And so I was like, oh, okay, like I feel like I made a good choice with it. So a quick synopsis of the story: the main male character finds the female main character's journal, and it's her journal of dying, talking about all of the things that she is doing before she dies of her pancreas disease. No one knows that she's dying besides her family, and she befriends this introverted classmate, our main male character. He is really shy, and he doesn't understand why she wants to be friends with him and hang out with him all the time. And that was a little sad, but the female main character is just so bubbly and sweet, and I really did love her character. She's dying, but she's also so happy, and she's making the most of it. And along the way, she's teaching him how to also live. She like loves going to all of these like all you can eat places, which I thought was funny because like, why not, right? Like she's dying, might as well eat everything. So basically they're just teaching each other how to live. And so they each learn something about themselves or how to live differently through the other person. The story is also a story based on coping with your own mortality. And by the end, not gonna lie, it had me legit crying, and I was not expecting the ending at all, but I was sobbing and it was fantastic. So going back to the beginning, before I even started the book, I was actually really nervous about reading it. I've had this sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I couldn't ever get myself to start it. I just felt like I was going into this whole new unknown world of manga, and trying new things can be hard. So before we get into how the experience was, if you could please take a second to subscribe to the channel, I would appreciate it. The channel has been growing lately, and that's been really exciting for me. So thank you so much for those of you who have subscribed. Now, if you don't know, when you read a manga, you start from the back. So for me, that is completely unnatural. At first, my brain and my hands hated this. I did get used to the feeling over time of reading this way. But I do feel like reading manga in an ebook format would be extremely helpful to me. Another obstacle you have when reading this for the first time is understanding what text bubbles to read first, as this is also backwards from reading a traditional American book. With the manga, you read the text bubbles right to left instead of when reading a normal sentence in a book. My force of habit tells me I need to read it left to right. So it was really hard when like starting out a new page, I had to stop and like look at it and force myself to figure out what bubbles to follow. and it just felt so unnatural. So as an example, on page 21, I was questioning in what order should I read this page or look at the pictures? And when I was asking my husband for advice, he told me like, oh, you know, it's mostly a feeling thing, which was so unhelpful. I took about an hour to get the hang of how to read the manga, like what dialogue to read first and like what order my eyes should look when they're looking at the page. And then about 50 pages into the manga, I also finally realized that each of the text boxes for the story meant different things. So this is a first-person story, so the squares are his internal thoughts, and each page when there are two people talking, their text bubbles have different outlines, so you can tell whose dialogue is whose. I also found the sound effects written out to be really interesting. It felt like a comic book, or it really made me think of the scenes in SpongeBob with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, where they'll be like, pow, kick. Like that's just what it made me think of. And I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. But it also has like the intended purpose where I'm like, oh, I understand like what they're going for. There are also moments where the main character is being spoken to and the text will say like introverted classmate or how their relationship is to the main character. And I feel like this is something that may be a translation issue. Like maybe there's a Japanese symbol to represent how close a person is to another or like their relationship. And we just don't have that in English, so the translation just needed to be actually written out. Also, we have these large pages with one drawing to indicate strong emotion or a big piece of information being revealed. These are my favorite pages that were done in the book because all of these illustrations are just so fantastic. So the book was divided up by 10 chapters, and each chapter seemed to have its own central theme. It wasn't really like a fiction book where you sometimes feel like you have to read the next chapter due to a cliffhanger. With this, each chapter felt like it was wrapped up very nicely and it was like, oh yeah, okay, like I could stop at the end of this chapter and not have this like incomplete feeling. Also, side note, about an hour into reading this, right when I got the hang of reading it on my own, I flipped to what would be the front cover for me and realized that there are instructions on how to correctly read the book. So I was a little bummed I didn't see that right away, but I realized that after reading the instructions, I did get it figured out correctly, all on my own, so, you know, no big deal. Then about 40% into reading the manga, I was hooked. I honestly loved it. I found myself really wanting to pick it up and see what was going to happen next. I loved the illustrations in it. They were just so expressive and so amazing. So I'm the type of reader in a normal book where I can see what I'm reading. When characters are in a room or their movements are being described, I can see it like a movie in my head. So with the manga having the visual aids, what I would normally see in my head when I'm reading was already done for me. I also found it interesting with the manga that only with the illustrations, I could really feel the emotions of the characters with the drawings alone. Seeing their facial expressions did so much to add to the story. So usually with traditional books, you'll have like the descriptions of the places and the people, but with this, it's all drawn and it just has this simple, quick dialogue, which also made for a super quick read. I really think manga for me will be this great casual palate cleanser between these other traditional books that I'm reading. It's something easier to digest with just these beautiful pictures and these quick dialogues. If you haven't read a manga before and are curious like I was, and you're looking for something on the sweeter side, I would definitely recommend this one. I think it was just a great one to start with, and I had a very nice time reading this. So that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.